In what is believed to be a legal first here in the UK, a judge has ruled that disagreeing with critical race theory is actually a belief protected by law. Sean Corby, an employee of ACAS, took the organisation to an employment tribunal after he was instructed to delete comments on Yammer that were critical of Black Lives Matter and the theory behind it. Corby argued that a better approach to addressing racism was to follow the ideas of Martin Luther King, who said that people should be judged by the content of their character rather than the colour of their skin. The judge ruled that Corby's comments were indeed protected by the Equalities Act, as they were classed as a religion or belief, in the same way that the views of Corby's colleagues, who found his remarks offensive, were also protected. So joining me now is the man at the centre of this dispute, Sean Corby. Sean, thanks ever so much for joining us. This is a landmark case, as we have seen. Could you just tell us, first of all, when you expressed your opposition to critical race theory, what was the response that you got at work?
Well, it wasn't just a case of expressing the opposition, it was expressing an alternative as well. So I posted I was instructed to remove 8 posts of articles that I'd shared on Yammer, which is an internal, like an intranet group. And those included a quote by Aisha Akambi, who's a commentator, British stylist of Nigerian descent, an article by Iyana Folarin Iman, and a picture and a link to a biog of Howard Thurman, who was the somewhat of a mentor to Martin Luther King. I presented these articles, and then in some positive comments that I received to them, I commented that yes, I believe that the way of Martin Luther King was preferable to that of Black Lives Matter, critical race theory, and the essence of my posts and the comments and the essence of my philosophical beliefs in relation to race rail against any form of segregation, separatism, and ethno-nationalism. So any kind of seeing everything through a race prism or fixation. I was told to remove them. I wasn't really given any reason why for a substantial amount of time. Then it transpired that 4 colleagues who were in the office in London, I work in Leeds, who never met me, didn't know anything about me, apart from perhaps seeing my profile picture at work. And they basically submitted a complaint, which, when I was given extracts of it to read, was pretty unhinged, Andrew, and accused me of being a racist, possibly with far-right sympathy or maybe even an activist. They requested bodyguards from ACAS, which I expect they'd wanted ACAS to pay for. And it was absolutely, they absolutely defamed me. And as I say, it was an unhinged, personal, unfounded, ludicrous attack. And ACAS allowed that to go forward to a formal grievance.
I think people watching will be utterly baffled by the idea that you're quoting all these black thinkers on the subject of race from an anti-racist position. You know, you're against racism and you're making that explicit. You're quoting Martin Luther King, and somehow people think this makes you a racist. I mean, what on earth is going on?
Yeah, it's ludicrous, and but it would be laughable. I mean, a dear friend of mine, one of my closest friends, he described it as being almost a cosmic joke that I, of all people, if you were to know my background, my life, who I am as a person, I live in relation to race. It's just the most absurd accusation. But it just goes to show that that people that hold certain political beliefs and ideological beliefs and have been, held by this psychological contagion that's going around in terms of the kind of race thinking and woke, whatever we call it, just how potentially vicious they can be to what they've done to someone like that. Yeah.
Well, indeed. I mean, in Robin DiAngelo's book, White Fragility, she makes, and she's a white woman, by the way, she makes the point that to invoke Martin Luther King's ideal of colourblindness is a form of white supremacy. And all of this, of course, is absolutely absurd. But are you concerned that, given your experience, that it has become almost impossible in society to have sensible adult discussions about these very sensitive topics?
Yeah, and of real serious concern to me is that the organisation I work for, ACAS, is a government department. It does some really valuable work and it has an important function. But it's got a very influential role. And one of the complainants is actually quite senior in the PCS union. Is a prominent self-styled activist, ethnocentric activist, who appeared on the front page of the Morning Star last year talking about her brand of racialised politics. Claims to be sought after by the likes of The Guardian, etc., for her views on race, and has formed organisations with some key figures that hold what you might call hard left and racialised thinking, and clearly had a real influence on the organisation that is meant to be impartial, but that seems to either be naive regarding these kind of views, ignorant to mine. Despite efforts before all this started, I wrote to the chief executive, to the race network, to the diversity and inclusion team, and shared different ideas and writings by people like Chloe Valdare, who's got a diversity training program that is non-CRT based, rooted in Martin Luther King's teaching, is not about shaming people, doesn't believe that white people are born with the original sin of racism, recognises that racial bigotry can exist, is possible to exist in all people, and doesn't treat racial groups as a homogenous blob, that they're all the same, there's complexity in all groups of people. And the leadership, senior leadership at ACAS that are making decisions and looking at influencing workplace practice and policy in relation to race are either naive or blocking any other perspective than the CRT one.
Yeah, it's very troubling, isn't it, when you have a theory like critical race theory, which is so divisive and actually, in my view, exacerbates racial tensions, and yet you're coming from a position of social liberalism, the ideas that were embodied by all the great civil rights luminaries of the past, and you're the one who is problematized, as they put it, and attacked. So when this happened at work now, I mean, it's now been established that your belief is protected by law. It's an odd that should even have to be established. But this should help, shouldn't it, Sean? This should help us to have these conversations now that we're reassured that the law is on your side.
I hope so. I mean, I had to, I was very intensely cross-examined over 3 days. And on the first day, it was in relation to me having to prove that my beliefs are a philosophical belief and that I just wasn't expressing views and opinions. So I had to undergo the Granger test, which, as I'm sure you'll be aware, is pretty stringent. And the fifth aspect of that, which ACAS contested before the hearing, but then decided on the morning of the hearing to be neutral on it, asserted that my beliefs, my ideas, the views that I expressed that are a manifestation of my philosophical belief were not worthy of a democratic society. So something akin to Nazism, for example, which again was so shocking and absurd. So I had to explain that my beliefs and my intellectual understanding and academic understanding in relation to race have come about and are rooted in my own life experience. The complainants said that I dismissed their lived experience as this term that people seem to use in certain ways now about lived experience, that only certain groups of people can understand certain topics and anybody outside that group can never understand and shouldn't even talk about it. But when it was disclosed after speaking with the judge that my upbringing was one where I was immersed in culture of black people, my family, my extended family of Jamaican descent, my children, my wife is black, my two sons are mixed race, they're black. I've been a professional musician many years, touring with great Jamaican artist, Gregory Isaacs, and all sorts of people. I'm a jazz musician. I've spent my life studying that music and the historical, cultural context. And I've lived my life with friendships with people from many different backgrounds. So the fact that I had to prove myself that I wasn't, and I'm not, a racist because I quoted Martin Luther King and expressed my philosophical beliefs in that way, pretty distressing, Andrew.
I imagine that's very upsetting, but I'm glad that the outcome has gone the right way. Sean Corby, thank you so much for joining me.